You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a trunk, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club, light some bottles, impress them girls. It's more than life.
Fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And, well, you know, if you've seen previous podcasts or anything like that, you know, I've heard the rule, you know, the kind of the rule of thumb with celebrating wins and things like that, like the whole 24-hour, 48-hour rule that you enjoy that win and then you're on to the next win. Well, if you'd followed me at all here recently, I was not feeling that way about the Saints' first two wins of the season. I was basking in them as much as I could and was fighting off anybody trying to pinch me and wake me up from my dreams because the first two games of the season had people having flashback Hoodats and Saints fans having flashbacks of 2009, 2011, 2018, and man, that all came crashing down big time. Just with a few like news reports and then an injury on the first drive of the game, and before you know it, we're back to 2021, 2023 New Orleans Saints. You know how they looked during that time period, and so I just basked in it. I wanted the wins to last as long as they did, and you know I'm glad I definitely got the most out of it, most enjoyment out of it as I could. But man, the season's not looking all that great now, and like I was saying, it all like came to a head from first thing came out is when the injury reports first came out for the game against the Philadelphia Eagles. It looked like the Saints were almost like fully healthy, you know, and it was a weird turnaround where I feel like I almost kind of jinxed them almost because I was talking about like how they had like 15 people on the injury report, and then the next thing you know, like everyone's practicing, and if they're not practicing, they're at least questionable, or we know that they're practicing. And even Taysom Hill, he practiced, was limited on Thursday and Friday, and then it comes out that he's doubtful and not going to play. And then we hear about Chauncey Gardner Johnson, or whatever. It looked on like the Philadelphia Eagles injury report like he wasn't going to play because he had like a foot injury or something that kept him from practicing Friday. And then of course he ends up being fine and playing and just being a complete annoyance to the Saints. I'm not even getting into that. But yeah, so that's when I knew that something bad was going to happen. I started having a bad feeling about this game because before they got the news about Taysom Hill and then obviously Eric McCoy going down, hell, I was feeling like recklessly confident about this game, you know. I didn't think the Saints were going to drop another 40 burger or nothing on anybody, but I was definitely prepared for them to definitely get another win and maybe cruise to another win. But they weren't able to do that. So now we're on to kind of just the injury report coming out of this game. The injury report is already, we know that Eric McCoy, who when I first saw him kind of walking around on the sidelines, I didn't think he was that hurt really. And then you kind of see him like wobbling into the blue tent and then coming out, and then you see him walking to the back. I honestly didn't think it was that serious, but then you hear that but now you hear today on Tuesday, around noon, 1 o'clock, you're hearing that it's needs surgery for a groin injury. So it's either torn or it's torn off the bone. So yeah, so that's not good. Hearing that Eric McCoy may miss 6 to 8 weeks. So, and I would almost think that he might not even come back. Like if the Saints are like only have like 3 or 4 wins, you know, like they're 4-9. So so 4-9 week 13 or or what 3-7 in week 10 or something. Like if they're at that, uh, yeah, 3-7 or like 4-9. Yeah, 4-9, 3-7, 4-9 come week 10, come week 13. Like coming back from such a severe injury, there'd be no point for him to even come back at that point. So possible that Eric McCoy may be back in 6 to 8 weeks, but honestly, depending on how the season and how many more wins they have by then, might not see him again. And that's just a real heartbreaker and a real hit to the offensive line. Not just because Eric McCoy, he's a Pro Bowler, center, probably your best offensive lineman right now, but you took some hits during the offseason that, I think the Saints and Saints fans and Hoodats, they kind of rolled with the punches a little bit. But those hits that they took in the offseason are really coming back and biting and hurting the Saints even more now, because it seems like a lot of people have kind of already gone past it and kind of just kind of brushed it off their shoulders because of how good the Saints looked in the first two games. But I mean, Saints lost an All-Pro, possibly Saints Hall of Famer right tackle in the offseason, and Cesar Ruiz due to a knee injury, and then they lost a great backup and journeyman offensive tackle that could play, or offensive lineman that could play any position, retired, and James Hurst. So you lost like two starters basically on your offensive line. I think James Hurst, he played like left guard last year, and then obviously for like a dozen games, Ramczyk played right tackle for you last year. So you just don't have those guys anymore. So really, it's almost like almost any team's offensive line. Any team, like they lose depth on their offensive line or have injuries at the offensive line, like any team is going to be hurt by that. But I think the Saints may be hurt a little bit more than other teams just because of the fact that they already lost some of their depth during the offseason. And I know there's probably a lot of people out there that will want to use like the Eric McCoy injury and the Taysom Hill Taysom Hill injury, like missing those two as like an excuse for like losing this game. But I won't be able to use the Eric McCoy injury as an excuse for this, because the Eagles dealt with the exact same thing. What was it? Lane Johnson went out. He must have been all confused and dizzy and stuff from having like a concussion or something, because they said he was on the sidelines throwing up. And then they lost. I'm trying to think if this was the Falcons or the Eagles, but they lost. Their backup center got hurt during the game, so they already had their backup in, and he went out with an injury. But they were able to at least hold stuff together and at least be able to move the ball. The Saints couldn't even move the ball. That was the big difference between these two teams, is the Saints just couldn't move it like at all. Like they had the one big nice run play by Alvin Kamara, and then that was pretty much it. But yeah, I'm not going to allow that to be an excuse for losing to the Eagles, because they were dealing with the exact same thing. And then coming up, I know this is in the future here, but for the game against the Falcons, the Saints can't use missing Eric McCoy in that game either, because they're dealing with the exact same thing. They're missing their center, and they're missing Taylor McGarry, I think. Trey McGarry, whatever, McGarry, their right tackle, starting right tackle too. So they're missing their center and their right tackle. So Saints cannot use the injury bug or injuries on the offensive linemen for excuses for this loss, or if they end up losing to the Falcons. It's not a viable excuse for me, at least. But anyway, so those are the injuries we came out of that. We also came out with another one, which who knows if this may have been like the final backbreaker that was like the bend but don't break part of the defense for the Saints in the game against the Eagles. They were like bend but don't break, bend but don't break, and then bend and shatter all over the place when they gave up a 60+ yard run to Saquon Barkley, and then no Demario Davis in on the final drive where they have like a 60-yard play, 60-yard reception to Dallas Goedert, and you have your three defenders in the middle of the field all like run into each other and fall down like bowling pins, looking like Three Stooges at the end of the game. Like I just feel that that was like the final, like the straw that broke the camel's back against the Philadelphia Eagles. The Saints would have won this game if Demario Davis would have been in on that final drive. I'm telling you, you wouldn't have three defenders run into each other like that. But I guess we're just waiting on when what his injury is going to be, I guess. But so let's get into like some stats and stuff, or kind of gaps and stuff like that real quick, and just kind of take a thought on some of these numbers here that are coming out of this game. But anyways, can I get a menu? And so this game, it's hard to feel as if the Saints really have any kind of home field advantage or dome field advantage anymore. They're getting the Philadelphia's on a short week, coming off of a brutal loss, and it should be there's 70,000 people in the dome, and it didn't seem to like help them like at all. I guess it helped them a little bit. I guess the Falcons had 7 penalties for 45 yards, and the Saints only had 3. But that's like one of many things were winning in the category, but it didn't seem to help them like at all. So they only had 3. I'll go through those real quick. So they only had 3 penalties for 25 yards. They forced the Philadelphia Eagles to turn it over on downs twice. They missed a 60-yard field goal, giving the Saints the ball at the 50-yard line. They blocked a punt, giving the Saints, setting the Saints up for their only touchdown. And then they forced 2 turnovers on the Philadelphia Eagles, an interception and a red zone interception and a forced fumble. Like I don't know how you can receive all of those extra possessions and good field position and only score 12 points. Like I don't even know how that's possible. If you'd have told me that the Saints were going to get all those turnovers and all those breaks and set up with all those situations where they had good field position, and then told me that the Philadelphia Eagles are only going to score 15 points, I would have thought the Saints are going to be blowing the Philadelphia Eagles out. Again, I would be thinking this is going to be another 40-15 win for the New Orleans Saints. But man, the NFL and just football and the sports in general are just week to week leagues. You got teams like the Panthers and stuff winning, the New York Giants, teams like that winning, and got Bengals going 0-3. You just can't predict this stuff. So I definitely enjoyed it while the Saints were 2-0 and scoring the most points since the 2009 Saints in the first 2 games. I was enjoying it and basically trying to make me feel like that was my playoff right then. And how that game against the Philadelphia Eagles kind of had like a playoff kind of feel into it to some extent. But if we're just going in, so just the Saints rushing numbers to Philadelphia's rushing numbers. So Philadelphia, they had 25 carries for 172 yards and 2 touchdowns, and 29, and then the Saints had 29 carries for 89 yards. So just basically the complete opposite of what they've been doing the first 2 weeks, basically. And then they allowed the Philadelphia Eagles to do that to them. And then let's see. And then they were able to throw the ball quite a bit as well. They were 29 for 38 for 311 yards, but no touchdowns and just an interception. And then you had Derek Carr, who was, he was 14 for 25 for 142 yards, a touchdown, and the interception at the end of the game, which was definitely a backbreaker. And he was only sacked once for 12 yards, but he was definitely under duress like the whole game. And just the 120, that 29-yard completion to Chris Olave that set him up for what felt like kind of at the time as possibly the game-winning touchdown, but it wasn't. And then just Saints were able to get 4 sacks on Philadelphia. So, but I mean, they threw it like almost twice as many times, and just total yards 460 to Saints 219. And then we went over all the penalties and turnovers and all that. That should have, you would have thought the Saints would have helped the Saints win the game, but they came away with like no points due to like on all of those. The only one that they came away with any points was the missed 60-yard field goal. The missed 60-yard field goal. They eventually marched down the field and got the touchdown. And then time of possession is 32 to 15, 32 minutes 15 seconds to 27 27 minutes to 45 seconds. So they had the ball a decent amount or more, not like a ridiculous amount more, but they had the ball more. And let's see, so we have Saints killers. Jalen Hurts has been a Saints killer in the previous games that the Saints have played the Eagles that he's actually started in. The Saints have got, I guess, a couple cheap wins on games where he hasn't played, but he put up definitely some numbers passing. Obviously didn't get a touchdown or anything like that, but put up a bunch of yards, and the Saints did a okay job in containing him, only allowing him to rush for eight times for 25 yards, but had one long for a 21-yarder. The Saints were able to force a fumble on one of those plays where he was trying to scramble out. Carl Granderson was able to do that. And then we had another Saints killer, which I guess I don't know why I didn't really highlight it, but the last couple times the Saints have played the Giants, it seems like Saquon Barkley's gone off, especially that game in 2021 when Jameis was the quarterback. He went off for like 100 and something yards and a touchdown in that game too. But yeah, Saquon having 17 carries for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns with the 65-yard backbreaker. And then he had 4 catches for just 9 yards. Nothing too exciting there. We went over Derek Carr, and then Saints didn't really have anyone else running the ball but Alvin Kamara in this game. He had 26 carries for 87 yards. The per carry average definitely wasn't there. And he had 3 targets and 3 catches for 40 yards. Had the one big 27-yard catch on Zach Bond, our favorite Eagle, Zach Bond, who ended up having 12 tackles in this game. And then, like I said, no one else really even ran the ball. Jamal Williams had 1 carry for negative yards. And then off of receivers, Chris Olave finally had a good game. He probably had his best game so far, catching 6 of 6 targets for 86 yards and a touchdown. And that's pretty much it for receiving yards. There really wasn't anything else there. Let's see, Reed Blankenship, that's who picked Derek Carr off, and then Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter are who seem to be wreaking a lot of havoc. They both accounted for a sack and 3 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits, and 2 pass deflections. So that, as you can see, Jordan Davis and Jaden Clark were wreaking havoc in the middle of the Saints offensive line there after Eric McCoy went out. But I mean, the Saints, man, they were trying so hard on defense. They were trying to make plays, Brian Bresee had 2 sacks. He had the 1 sack that set him up in 3rd and 16, all the way back on on the Eagles 30-yard line, and had them set up in 3rd and 16, and they are in play man coverage and have 3 guys with no Demario Davis on the field, have 3 guys just run into each other like a bunch of clowns. But Brian Bresee, he had 2 sacks. 2 tackles, 2 solo tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 2 quarterback hits. So at times they were getting that after the quarterback, but there seemed like other times where he had all day to throw. And you had Tyrann Matthews, who I think he's had like a turnover in like 3 or 4 straight games, had an interception for a 23-yard return, a pass deflection, 7 solo tackles, and a tackle for loss. And then you had Carl Granderson, who had a sack and a half and 5 combined tackles, 4 solo, 1 assist, 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits, and a forced fumble. And then Alontae Taylor had a half a sack. So I mean, the defense they were trying to make plays and make stops and give the offense extra opportunities. The Saints offense just didn't take advantage of the 4 or 5 extra opportunities and possessions and chances at good field position. They just didn't do anything with it. And then Saints just could never get off the field like on 3rd down. Like, so I mentioned all the Saints like turnovers and blocked punts and turnovers on downs and interceptions, all that. And the Saints were just could never really get them off the field just normally, like on 3rd down, because they were only punted to once. They only punted to him once. And then Hayball, he was really good actually, with making four punts with a 4.5 average with a 52 long. But most of those he was like kicking from like the Eagles 40, which was kind of, I mean, that's something that probably comes into question now because he was punting. Like Dennis Allen was choosing to punt when they were at like the Eagles 40, 41-yard line. So those would have been like what, 58, 59-yard field goals. Just one of those on top of like the one where the Saints could have kicked one when they decided to go for it instead, when it would have just been a chip shot field goal. And it looked like Alvin Kamara got it. It looked like he fell backwards as Bond was tackling him, and he reached out for the first down market. I still don't understand why they didn't challenge that. They didn't challenge the spot, and I don't. And man, if they'd have just kicked that field goal and not went for 2, they would have won this game by 1 point. I know it's all woulda, coulda, shoulda, or what you should have done, or thinking in hindsight. But man, they should have won this game. They should have blown this team out, honestly. But so that's most of the stats and stuff there. There's no return yards. There's no field goals made. I guess there was a field goal made. Yeah, there was. There's 2 field goals made. Blake Groupie made 2 like medium to short like field goals. And if he just had 1 or 2 more, it'd have been nice. All right, so now let's move on to MVPs and stuff here now. So the MVP I picked originally for this game was Rashid Shaheed, and he had been the life and the jumper cables and the energy drink for the Saints the first 2 weeks. And man, he came up small in this game. This may have been the worst game that Rashid Shaheed has had in his career, honestly, because he had what 2 or 3 drops, and 2 of them would have been for like what we were wanting, those 40, 50-yard touchdown games. And that's something I was saying like earlier in the off season is the Saints, they have like skill positions players, but they don't really have depth, and then they don't really have a in traffic a contact receiver, or a receiver that can catch contested passes, and that's definitely what we saw out of Rashid Shaheed on Sunday, is that he can't catch a pass, contested catches or a jump ball. Like that's not his game. He's got to have a couple steps on a defender, or he's not going to come down with it cleanly. Like all Rashid Shaheed had to do was catch one of those passes from Derek Carr, one of the ones that would have been a touchdown. If he would have caught the one early on that would have put the Saints up 10-0, I think the Saints would have cruised to another win and would have blown the Philadelphia Eagles out again. But it's just football. It's a game of inches, and there's a perfect example of it. Then I think he catches that first one. They go up 10-0. Hell, we're not even talking about Eric McCoy's injury right now. No one is even caring. But that didn't happen. So Rashid Shaheed, I picked you, and what happens? You have the worst Well, I swear I'm jinxing these guys. He has the worst game of his career because he was targeted 5 times with no catches, no yards, nothing. And he even had a chance at a kickoff return, or no, it was a punt return, but he let it bounce and slid down to get it. And the Saint, like I said, the Saints had a couple times where they had the Eagles like in third and long and backed up in their own territory. And I was like, man, they just got if they could just get this stop here, maybe Rashid Shaheed can have a big punt return or something. But man, the Saints they just could never get them off the field, force them to punt in this game. It was maddening. It really was. But anyway, so the actual like offensive MVP of this game, I'd say pretty easy. I'd say it was Chris Olave. He was 6 for 6 on his targets for 86 yards, a touchdown, and he had that 29-yard catch that set the Saints up in Eagles red zone, and that was after Trevor Penning tried to kill that defensive back by shoving him into the benches and had the Saints backed up after they had just picked up a big gain and got close to Eagles red zone. They got backed up 15 yards and then were back at like their own 40 because of it. But then had Derek Carr hit Chris Olave with that 29-yard strike, which ended up setting them up for a go ahead touchdown later on, a few plays later. So that'd be Chris Olave on the offense. And then if I was to go for defense, even though Brian Bresee had the 2 sacks, they were kind of spread out a little bit more, and I would be saying he's the MVP right now if the Saints would have won because he had the sack that set him up, that set the Eagles up with 3rd and 16 at the end of the game. But it gets wiped out and doesn't really matter. It's not worth as much as it was. So for my defensive MVP, who I think was pretty much wreaking havoc the whole game, and not just like one pump moment he's getting a sack here and then one moment he's getting a sack here and then you don't really hear or see anything of him for the rest of the game because Bresee he had 2 sacks, but he only had 2 solo tackles and he had two tackles for loss. So I guess uh, one of his solo tackles was a tackle for loss along with the sack, and then he had 2 quarterback hits. But Carl Granderson, he had a sack and a half, so close to 2 sacks. He had 5 total tackles, 4 solo, 1 assist, 2 tackles for loss, and 2 quarterback hits. And he was just a little more active than Brian Bresee. But then he also had the forced fumble as well, so that kind of puts him over Brian Bresee, and then even over Tyrann Mathieu, who just had the interception. So he had a sack and a half, and a forced fumble. So I would give my defensive MVP to Carl Granderson. That's nice to see that Carl Granderson is still coming with the same kind of energy that you've seen him with the last couple of years before he got paid. And it's no fluke, the 9 interceptions that he had last year and what he'd been doing, the 5.5 before that. And that's not fluky, And man, the Saints need it because I mean, did Cam Jordan even play last night or on Sunday? Like, does he even play for this team anymore? I think I read something somewhere where he only played like 23 of the snaps or something like that. Only played like 13 of the defensive snaps, something like really low like that. 23%, which is like the lowest of his career since he was like a rookie or something. But man, I think it's fair enough to say that that Cam Jordan is washed, and then we talk about how we got some of these older veterans on our team. So I think Cam Jordan is washed, but now I think with Demario Davis, we don't know what he's hurt with yet, but I think Demario Davis, he's still a great player, but what comes with age and what ends up taking out great players, is either they lose a step or they start to get to the point where they can't stay healthy. And it looks like we're going more the route of we're going to start getting nagging injuries and aren't going to be able to stay healthy now with Mario Davis because he dealt with some I think he missed like one game last year for like the first time with the Saints due to like a tight hamstring or groin type of thing, and I think that's what he was dealing with on the final defensive drive of this game. Was dealing with a tight hamstring and groin issues. hopefully it doesn't end up being as bad as Eric McCoy's, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. But it seems like maybe Mario Davis and Cam Jordan, those kind of guys are kind of looking over the sunset a little bit, which shouldn't be surprised when you got multiple players on your team that are 35, 36 years old. It's just not sustainable having that many people, many veteran players, older players making your team older. So we got Carl Granderson as our defensive MVP, and then on special teams, I'm that's kind of a bit of a tough one for special teams uh, because I was wanting to give it to the Saints. Uh, is it Justin Hardy? I think. Hardy. I think of who their gunner is that that got that for them. That's Cleveland Browns. I'm trying to remember what player that is. Saints number 48. He's like our Pro Bowl gunner. Yeah, JT Gray is who I'm giving that to as the special teams MVP for getting that block punt. That was a wild play because I remember like while I was sitting there and thinking about how the Saints offense had been playing bad and how they didn't have Taysom Hill, didn't have Eric McCoy, and they just were just going three and out, and just after getting those first 3 points, just couldn't do anything. And I was just like, man, the defense needs to show their ass this entire game, which they did, except two plays where they gave up 60-yard plays. But I was also like, right when before that punt block happened, I was like, man, I just need a punt block or a special team score, and then boom, that punt got blocked, and I thought, hey, we're back. But then they just turn around and like go three and out and do nothing with it. Man, that game was frustrating to watch. I'm glad I was watching it alone. Let's just say it was very, very frustrating and very infuriating to watch this game. And then on to my hot take, which was incredibly wrong. I think I need to start going back to doing like hot takes on the offensive line because I predicted that the Saints were going to keep the Philadelphia Eagles under 100 yards rushing, and they ended up rushing for 25 times for 172 yards and two touchdowns. So okay, we're back finally back to reality. Oops, there goes gravity. And I was definitely got pinched somewhere around then on making those offensive line hot takes and just with how many points the Saints have been scoring. Definitely come back to reality with the hot take there. That was terrible. Should have known better with Saints killers, Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley actually being healthy to play in this game. Should have took that a little bit more into account, I guess. And then my picks and scores, like I picked the Saints to win. I thought it was going to be kind of a closer game throughout like the first half, which I mean it was. It was 3-0 throughout the first half, and then I said I thought the Saints were going to trail for the first time in this game, but then I thought they were going to make some second half adjustments and kind of cruise to victory and win 31-20. But that didn't happen. We did see them trail for the first time, and the game was close. Pretty much, it was 3-0 until the fourth quarter. So I mean, the game was close throughout. So I was kind of half right. I was kind of half right about how I thought kind of the game would go, but didn't get the pick right, and the Saints weren't able to make the second half defensive adjustments as we were guessing. I'd much rather them have allowed those 15 points in the first half and then shut them out in the second half. I think that probably would have benefited the Saints a little bit more, but it didn't go that way. But anyways, man, there's just so much to go into about this game, and it's just so painful to want to talk about it. I I think the Saints had many opportunities to win this game. I think not going for the long field goals a couple times, like punting, and the Eagles, 40-yard territory. It had been some 58, 59-yard field goals, which, I mean, they weren't afraid to kick a 57-yarder against the Carolina Panthers, and then you're up 3-0 and you decide to go for it when you could have got a chip field goal. Man, just them things that you think back on, it just killer. They're killers. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. So, who dat? And can I get a check, please?